Well, welcome everybody to the Prosperous podcast, guests. This is something that I am super, super excited to be sharing with you all. And it's because podcasting has meant a whole heck of a lot to me in my business. And I'm really excited to be sharing with you what I've learned in the past 4 years of podcasting on my own podcast and podcasting on other people's podcasts. But I can tell you it is the best way that you can be getting out there, getting your voice out into the world, being visible, and growing a prosperous business. And I'm Cami Gellner. I am a business coach. I'm a connector. I'm a storyteller. And I help women raise up their voice, their visibility, and grow their business to the next level. And I run a mastermind program, and we have an Extraordinary Women Connect community. And there's all kinds of ways that I like to play out in the world in the work that I get to do. And podcasting, my podcast is Extraordinary Women Radio. Podcasting in general is my favorite way to be putting our visibility out into the world, our most important work out into the world, to grow our communities, to grow our revenue, our bottom line. And all of these things have really, being on a lot of different podcasts has changed my world. So it's been something that I've been playing around, wanting to bring more to my clients, wanting to bring more to my community. And I am so excited to be sharing some of this with you guys today. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about why podcasting is hot right now. It truly is. It is the hottest place you can be putting your voice. We'll get into all of that here in just a moment, but it is truly the hottest place you can be putting your voice out. I'm going to be sharing some new tools on your messaging strategy so that you really shine your best light when you show up on a podcast. I'm about ready to hit 200 episodes on my podcast. I've talked to a lot of guests. I can tell you what strategies really work. And that's something that I want to, really just keep in touch with you guys is how do you come out and really have a message that matters? And we're going to talk about how you can get on more podcasts and really turn this into building and growing your business, and how you can be a great guest that gets invited onto more podcasts. Because once you start that process, what happens is you start getting on a lot more podcasts. And then how do you really leverage the content that's coming, that you put out? Because guess what? When you start podcasting, you are going to have so much content to work with. How do you really leverage that and how you're showing up in all different sorts of ways? So let's start with this, why podcasting is hot right now. I can show you some of the stats that we've found. 55% of the U.S. population has listened to a podcast, up from 51% in 2019. So these are 2020 stats. And so 55% of the U.S. population has listened to a podcast. That's a lot of them. And 37% of those have listened to a podcast in the last month. So in other words, they're continuing to go back, and they listen to podcasts weekly. I listen to a podcast almost daily. I have my list of shows that I follow, and I'm always watching for the ones that pop up, and I'm excited to hear them. So I know podcasting has become an intricate part of my learning process, is that I'm always listening to other podcasts that help me grow. So extremely important as part of that. 27% of U.S. podcast listeners have a 4-year degree. Versus 19% of the U.S. population. So they're more educated. And podcast listeners subscribe to an average of 6 shows in the last week. So they are saying, okay, what are the shows I want to follow? Who are the people that I need to have more information from? And it's such an easy way for people to stay in touch with you. Podcast listeners are much more active on every other social media channel. So they are out there, they get to know you, they're sharing your content, they're sharing who you are. And that's where it's really, your word gets spread more. And this is what I really love. On average, 45% of podcast listeners have an annual household income of more than $250,000. So this is a place that this is a way that podcasters can really, you can be talking to people that actually have dollars to pay for your services. So super exciting about that. I thought I'd start with what podcasting has done for my business. So I've had 200 episodes on Extraordinary Women radio. And I have been speaking to guests like Tosha Silver, Zainab Saldi, Sark. That was such an amazing one to be able to speak with Sark. Beth Comstock, Lissa Rankin, Brian Kramer, Elise Nelson. I mean, the list goes on. And what's beautiful about that, so this is a good example of that, is Tammy Simon is the founder of Sounds True. Tammy sends me a lot of really great guests because she is a publisher and she's wanting her authors to get exposure. And this has become a really valuable source of new contacts for me. And they're high value contacts. I have guested on 35 shows. If I think about the number of people that I have reached by speaking on my podcast and on other people's podcasts and speaking to the audiences of the people that I have interviewed, I have hundreds of thousands of people have been exposed to my message. And I can tell you, I could not be on that many stages in the past 4 years to have reached that many people. So to me, when I think about what's the best way that I can get my voice out to the most people and the easiest way and the shortest amount of way, it is truly podcasting. I have expanded my collaboration and connection quotient. And this is all about, I can collaborate with Tammy Simon. I can collaborate with so many amazing, I have Tosha Silver's assistant that we communicate back and forth on a regular basis. So there is, when you put this, when you're going out like this, your collaboration and connection quotient, and how good you can go out and reach into communities and be in communities and engage with communities and do good for other people. I mean, you obviously want to make this a win-win for others. This is something that really happens with podcasting. This podcasting has given me exponential growth year on year in my business. Including last year. I had a 50% growth last year. And it's because, so we were in a lockdown across our world, all around our world. And my business grew by 50% last year. And it grew, and it's grown like that for several years in a row. And it's because I am showing up, I am listening to what my audiences need, and I'm making a difference for them. So it's grown my communities exponentially, my Extraordinary Women Connect community. It builds my brand. It builds my credibility. All of this is such an important part of how we get out, how we share our best messages, how we make an impact. And that's what podcasting has done for my business. I wanted to show this because this has kind of been a side benefit of being on a podcast. Last year, I was named to the 25 most powerful business or women in business, the 25 most powerful women in business by the Colorado Women's Chamber. And I know that happened because of my podcasting, because of the connections that I had, the community that I've built. So, this was just a side advantage of being what podcasting could do for me. And what I also know is that podcasting has grown my clients' businesses. There's been exponential growth in their businesses. There's been a ripple effect of how they're showing up. They have learned to put their message out in big ways. They have gone, and some of them have started their own podcast. Some of them have been on multiple podcasts. Some of them have started YouTube channels. Some of them have started live streams. All these are different ways that you can really start to show up in your message and show up in your voice and get out and be visible. So such a powerful way for you to get out is being on podcast. And it's helped all of them reach new markets. Now, this was a series that we ran last year called Own Your Genius for Impact on the World. This was some of my clients from last year. And they were on we did a live stream series on this. So often I'm talking about podcasting. I'm going to say podcasting, live streaming, YouTube channels, they kind of go hand in hand. And you can apply a lot of these same principles across the board for these different ways of reaching your audience. And what podcasting can do for your business, bottom line, it can grow your business. And it's going to raise up your voice, your visibility, and your prosperity. It's going to and really increase your know, love, and trust factor with your ideal clients. And it's really the way that you can grow your business from this pandemic and beyond. I think that the increased listenership, there's not an easier way to get your message out. So you have a message to get out into the world, an impact to make. This is where I want you to start thinking about it, right? I want you to think about being an extraordinary podcast host that gets you invited on more podcasts. I want you to deliver your most powerful stories and messages. And we're going to really get into stories and messages and how you start to really stand out, build your know, love, and trust factor, and turn this magic into dollars coming through your door. So we did a lot of research last fall. We started this last fall. And I'm going to have to keep my voice working here. I'm going to keep the chat open here too. So the market research we did, I saw this big opportunity, right? I knew that podcasting was making an incredible difference in my business. And I knew it was making a difference for my clients. And I wanted to bring more of this out into the world. When I think about raising up your voice, your visibility in your business, that's what I am out to impact 1 million women, get 1 million women out into the world, getting their voice out into the world in bigger ways and helping them make their impact. And I thought podcasting is one of the best ways that I can really make this happen, right? Is to do this. But I wanted to do the research. So first of all, I did a survey of a lot of people a lot of the women in my community, just to talk about how important podcasting is. And so when I reached out to them, I asked them, I said, how does podcasting fit into your 2021 marketing plans and strategy? So you can see really quickly, people already had a podcast, only 13%. So there's a lot of opportunity to grow there. I plan to launch a podcast in 2021. So that's interesting, right? So more than half of the people that were saying they already have a podcast, and you had 16% coming and saying, okay, I'm ready to launch my podcast. And then I'm going to continue getting on other people's podcasts. And I want to begin podcasting. So I saw this big opportunity here. It's like, yes, there's an interest. And I asked the question, I said, if you think about the overall importance of podcasting in your marketing strategy for 2021, and they had a sliding scale. So they could move that across the board where they wanted that to be. So this turned out to be 74, the scale. So 1 through 100, slide that scale to how important it is. It was a 74. So that told me that this is a really important piece for people. And this is really interesting. How many podcasts were you featured on as a guest in 2020? 1 to 5 was the largest number here, right? And how many podcasts would you like to be featured on as a guest in 2021? Look at this. The 1 to 5 is just a small percentage of this. And everybody was, I want 6 to 10, I want 11 to 20, I want 21 or more. So this is a great way to be able to, I saw this need in the market space. So my aha was the desire to guest podcasts was increasing significantly. And there's a growing listenership. So yeah, people want this. And when asked what was keeping them from being on more podcasts, the number one response was, I don't have a system to reach out to podcast hosts. And so this was like, okay, let's do something with this, right? And then I did a second body of research. And it says, when it comes to finding quality guests, what is it? So about 35% said I'm always on the search for extraordinary guests. And then we had this percentage here that says I'm occasionally on the search for extraordinary women guests. We had some that said, yep, I've got plenty. And, I tend to fall into this category. I have plenty of people coming in to my show. I probably get pitched 10 pitches a day. And I'm not seeking new guests, but this told me that there was this large percentage here, almost 60% of these podcast hosts were saying, I want more guests. I need guests. So this was a great opportunity. So today what I'm going to show you is how right you are that you want to be more on more podcast guests, as or podcast shows as a guest. And I want to share how you can be a great guest by having really clear, valuable messages that the show's audience will learn from, grow from, connect with you, build that know, love, and trust factor. And then how to find the right podcast shows for you to pitch your message to. And the secret to how do you make podcasting lucrative, because you really need to be in the right space in your business to make this lucrative. But when you are in the right space, it is absolutely the place that you want to step into. So let's start with your message, because your message matters. And those of you who know me, those of you who are just new to me for the first time today, this is a space where we have to start with our message, and that it really matters how we're showing up with this. And if you're going to be a great guest, there's a couple pieces to this that's really important. One is you want to have a message that is your unique opinion and approach to serving your audiences. The whole world could hear one message from you. What is it? And we'll get into what that looks like and what it is and what it's not. We'll talk about story. I believe story is an intricate part of how you be a great podcaster, because you want to have multiple stories and different angles into your teachings, and then having a content strategy for diversity. So all your interviews, if you're guest podcasting on 35 different shows, you don't want your interviews all to sound the same. You really want to give people different ways into your stories. So really, really important. So if the whole world could hear one message from me, is women's wisdom is the medicine our earth needs. So this is my core message, right? It's the medicine our earth needs. And when I think about that, this is what really, this is what I'm so passionate about. I am so passionate about this. And I thought what I would start with today, assuming that the technology works appropriately, so you guys will have to tell me. This is one that I just podcasted on recently. And when you go to this, I got really clear about this was my core message. So you will hear me drop this message in podcasts, in my own podcast and other podcasts, and then there'll be all kinds of teaching points around that. But what's really powerful about this is when I say this, people, they stop. They say, "Oh, tell me more what this means." And that's an important piece, because this is something that I want people to notice, and I want them to quote me on this and to use that in a way that comes back to me. And there's multiple roads into this. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I was just on the Goddess Talk podcast with Kristen Lynch, and Kristen, at the very beginning of this interview, so she picked out a little nugget to start her podcast with. And it's my message around what this means. When I'm talking about, when I am talking about women's wisdom is the medicine our earth needs, she said, "Tell me more." She pulled that out of the interview, and she put that at the very beginning of the show before she even opened up the show. So she liked what that message was. So I've put a lot of thought around that. And I didn't give her a pre-hint that this was my core message, right? This was not the thing that I told her. This is my most important message. She did a little research on my the work that I have done, and she heard that somewhere, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I love that. I want to know more." So I'm going to play for you just this little nugget. And as this starts to play, if you guys will just drop in the notes that you hear it, so that I make sure that it's going through in the appropriate way, that would be fabulous in the chat box. I am starting this. This is about 13 minutes. The very first part of this interview is where she dropped in my description of this. But I want you to see how this came up in the interview, so that you can hear a little bit about it. And then you can hear how that message carries forward. So having a core message like that is going to be so important. So here goes this. I'm going to flip this on. If you guys will tell me that you can hear it with my gift.
Yep. I'm totally with you. Oh, this is already just affirming how aligned this connection was meant to be. So I really want to hear. I've heard you mention that women's wisdom is the medicine that our earth needs. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I didn't prompt her on that. Our world is in a really changing space, right? I mean, we're going through something really significant. And I think those of us who do the work that we do, were born into this time for a reason, right? We were born to help lead us into the next evolution of humanity, help us lead into the next evolution of how we take care of our world, our earth. And when I think there's the masculine way that we have been so entrenched in for so long. And it's shifting, right? It's really shifting more into the feminine, and it's not male or female. It's really it's the feminine or the masculine energy we all have within us. And part of this doing is a masculine energy, right? And instead, stepping back and being and feeling and intuiting what's meant to be moving forward. And so it's a different way of leading. It's a different way of showing up in the world to do our work. And this evolution, I think even this last year, which was just such a difficult year for so many people, it's like we went through a portal. We went through a portal of, okay, this was a tough time. And there is brightness on the other side of that. And when I think about stepping into this brightness, into the expansiveness of it, where you feel like you're going through a vortex where it's really tight and there's tension associated with it, from a politics to the just the whole COVID thing. But it's everything that happened in this last year there was so much tension around that. And when you step to the other side of it, you feel expansion of it. And I'll tell you, we just did a 3-day live. Okay. So did you see how she asked me? She did the research on who I was, and she came back to me and said, I want to know more about why you think women's wisdom is the medicine our earth needs. She pulled that out. I did not prompt her for that. And that's the beauty of having something that's really powerful. And I can tell you, every time I drop that in an interview, people pause and they say, let's go deeper with it. And that's what you really want to do is go deeper into your work with people and give them an opportunity. And when you own that core message of who you are, that's how you really start to find something to go deep into deeper conversations. So I'm going to show some of the tools that I use when I'm approaching this. And I talked a little bit about this, right? Is that having a different pathway into your stories, into your messages every single time you have a conversation. So not every interview is exactly the same, because that would be really boring. So I want you to think about, if the whole world could hear one message from you, what would that be, right? What would that one message be from you? And I'm going to give you a couple of other examples. So Dana Kirchmar is one of my clients. I love this one. What if we stopped asking girls if they're good at math and instead started asking what problems they would love to solve, right? So that gets people who are in the world of STEM going, oh my gosh, it's getting them to act and do differently, right? So it's such a powerful way to approach that. This is another one of my clients, Shelley Shell. When women invest in companies they believe in, our world will change. She's a financial advisor, and she wants women to really get involved in their own investing and their own decisions with money, and start caring about where they're putting their money. And that changes. And so it's a great way for people to go deeper into this with her. How do people do this, right? So this is the approach that we can start to do this. So your one message for the world, what it is an opinion. It's something that you uniquely own. It's memorable and repeatable. And you're putting your stake in the ground that this is my message. This is what I believe, and this is a change that I want to create. And it gets people to stop and think and notice what you're saying. I know Dana dropped hers recently in a television interview. And, and I'll tell you in a moment, this work that I share actually came from where I was doing a lot of thought leadership training, putting people on television. It's the same kind of concept, because if you're in a television interview or you're on a podcast interview, you want people to hear something that they go, oh, tell me more about that. When she was on a television interview just recently, they said she dropped that quote of, and what if we stopped asking girls if they are good at math and instead ask them what they love? The reporter went, what? Tell me more about that. That's brilliant, right? Because that takes into a deeper conversation, and that's what you really want to make happen. What your one message to the world is not is a tagline or a positioning statement. That's a marketing language. It's different than that, right? It's not a quote from someone else. It's uniquely yours, and you can't be an expert on somebody else's quote. It's about making you an expert, and it's not an inspirational saying that's kind of soft and fluffy that you might put on a pretty meme. It's about something that you're throwing that stake in the ground, and it's not a common statement that you might hear all the time. Like, for example, find your purpose, live your life. I mean, that's just too mundane. It doesn't make people stop and really go into that deeper. So when you're thinking about what it is you want to stand for, and if you had one thing to say to the whole world, what would it be? I would love for you all to just take a moment on that and just jot down a couple of things that comes up for you. So I'm going to pause and let you write down a few things. If you have one thing to say to the world, what would it be? The whole world gets to hear a message from you. What is it? And make it meaningful. Give them something to think about. Give them something and I can tell you, you're going to get a couple minutes here to work on this. Dana will tell you. Shelley will tell you. I'll tell you. Even mine. Took me a while to find that message. It takes doing that inner work of, what's flowing through me? How am I making an impact? All these sorts of things that you get to. But sometimes they're right there and they're ready for you. If someone has something that is coming up for you, drop it into the chat box. Any ideas? Susan Eckert says, well, let's start with Camille's because hers was first. I connect the world with words. That's a positioning statement, Camille, and I like that. So what is it that you want? And you could play with that a little bit. You could say, I like the iteration of that. It's short, it's memorable, and it's very much a positioning statement. So you could say, words make the world do what, right? Words make the world go deeper, or, that's totally not the right thing, but it's like you want it to, you're putting your opinion around it. So I think it's something that I think you've got the right components of that, Camille. You just want to take it out of a positioning statement more into how it's unique. You're really saying something about words and how it impacts the world, so that there's something there that's really uniquely yours. Susan Eckert, the time has come for women to reevaluate their place in the world, firmly plant their soul seed, and bloom into their full power. I like that. I like the concepts of this. And you might say, when women plant what you might do is say, when women plant their soul seeds, their full power blossoms, or something like that. So you're talking about, really taking care of the soul and planting those soul seeds. It's really that's how people will come into their power. So I think you've got right components to that. Ashara, the way our animals live in the world is what we need to survive as species. Ooh, I like that a lot, Ashara. I think that's brilliant for you. Casey Hibbert, chronic and complex illnesses can be reversed. So that's a statement. What can be memorable? What could you say about that? And because I know you you really focus on different types of healing, right? So different types of healing that you could to bring to chronic and complex illnesses. So you could be talking about that healing is within us, or the healing of chronic and complex illnesses are within us, or are, there's something that you can play with that makes it a little bit more poetic than versus that kind of a statement. So really good stuff. Tracy Terry, I connect businesses to business credit. That's again a positioning statement, right? I connect it. That's saying what you do. You could play with something on that around what's the business credit? What's the business credit value? The power of leveraging, additional dollars in your business can create something along those lines. Cheryl, you guys are good. This is awesome. Cheryl, I love, there's a warrior in all of us just waiting to be discovered. Perhaps it's a little bit soft, Cheryl. And I would play with that a little bit around, there's a warrior in all of us just waiting to be discovered. The warrior, why does the warrior want to come out, right? So the warrior in us what's the why, right? And what's the impact of that? Kathy McCarty, we all need to know we have safe spaces within our homes and lives. Kathy, I want yours to have a little bit of a shock factor around what meth toxins, that there's meth toxins. Did you know? I want that. Yours might have something around facts. Meth toxins in our homes can That's kind of a positioning statement, what you've got. Okay. We've got a lot of different ones coming, guys, and I'm not going to be able to address them all. Let me just scroll through here. Christine, resilience is more than a buzzword. I think that's kind of fun. I think that's a fun one, Christine. Dana Edwards, making finances fun makes society better. Ooh, that's kind of a fun one. So good. I think this is good. You guys can in fact, what I'll do is I'll go out to Extraordinary Women Connect and make a post later today where you guys can continue to bring some of your statements to us, and I'll go out and continue to make comments on it, because I think that can be really valuable, and it's a good place for people to learn, right? So you guys, this is awesome. I love all the ones that you're coming. So keep yours there. And if I didn't get to yours, make sure you go out to Extraordinary Women Connect and put it there so that so that I can follow up with you and just give you some more feedback on that. So awesome job. Awesome job. So in addition to this, really getting clear about how it is we want to make a difference, I want you to start thinking about how you're showing up in the voice of you, right? We fall in love with souls and not faces. So this means truly being you when you show up on a podcast and not trying to be somebody else. If I tried to be a Tony Robbins on stage or on video, it wouldn't match. It wouldn't fit me, right? Find who you are and really lean into that, or not lean into, just show up as you. And the way that we can really tap into our souls is our stories are a window to our souls. And so that means really tapping into the windows of your soul to find those stories. Oh, Liz Morgan had a great question. What's Extraordinary Women Connect? Thank you, Liz. Extraordinary Women Connect is my Facebook group. So if you go out and you go out to Facebook and hit Extraordinary Women Connect, you will be in my community, my super community that I have that's all about connecting great women to great women. So that's where you can find that. And that's where you guys can go. After I make that post this afternoon, you guys can go put your words there. So why stories matter? Stories are what people relate to, right? They connect with us on our stories. They're going to make you memorable. There's so much noise out in the world. And if you have a story that they connect into, they go, oh my gosh, she gets me. She's relatable. And so it makes you more relatable. It builds your know, love, and trust factor. And it brings intrigue and interest into the conversations that you have. So stories are incredibly important. And whether you are on a stage, whether you're on a podcast, whether you're on a live stream, you want to be bringing stories into the mix of them. Thanks, Corinda, for sharing that. So how my story arcs, I'm going to do just a little bit short piece of this. And I have lots of different stories. I have lots of them. But one of my stories starts out, let me just go there for a moment. So it was a day when the snow was falling. It had gotten about 18 inches of snow. And I was on the phone with my coach and I was in tears. I was crying. I was trying to figure out what the heck I was meant to do on that day. I'd been interviewing for jobs. I had been looking out for, what's my next step in life? And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where I fit. And so I said to my coach, I don't know what I'm meant to do. And I was in tears. And she said, you know what you should do today is you should go out and you should breathe your horse's breath. And I was like, really? Huh. Okay. I've been a horse lover my whole life. I'll take you up on that. So I put on my snow boots and I trudge out to the barn through the 18 inches of snow, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful Colorado day. The snow boughs are weighted down on the trees. And, it was just, I get to the barn and there's my paint mirror, and she is there and she's looking at me. And the story goes on to tell how I found where I was supposed to go, right? So I tell that story often. And because it's what the horses were what got me to the place that helped me see where I was meant to go. I got to the barn. I was breathing in with her breath. And then I turned my back to her back. And lo and behold, all of the ideas came to me. And I knew where I was supposed to go. I wasn't meant to go back into the corporate world. It's my story that took me out of that. So I tell that story over and over again. There's lots of different stories that are there. And when you think about your life story titles, what are the titles of your story that really are significant in your life, right? So pause on that for a moment and just take a moment and write down perhaps some of the top stories. I mean, when I think of some of my top stories, that's one of them, right? Is the horse story. The breath of a horse helped me change my life forever. That's one of my life story titles. Getting on a stage and just totally failing when I was in the corporate world is a story that I tell. I can tell when I started following all the shiny stars in my business instead of really building my business and my brand from the inside out. So I have these story titles that I've got a long list of them. I want you to think through what are some of the most significant stories in your life and how that have really shaped to where you're at. So take a moment and start to just jot down some of your story titles. And as you get that, share a couple of your story titles. I have one that always gets people to laugh is the day the pilot fell out of my balloon, my hot air balloon, and I had to land it by myself. That was an interesting story. So I can weave that one into resiliency. I can exactly right, Susan. Taking the ice, Janet. Oh, nice. Right? What else do you guys have? Because when you get these stories, people go, "Oh, I want to know more about this." Right? How middle-aged princess becomes a warrior queen. Right? Totally. Out of pain comes your purpose. Yeah, Nancy. So you had this moment. Well, you had a moment of pain, and it's like you found your purpose. Feeling the healing. Kathy went through a whole journey of healing. Trusting in my dissatisfaction, shattered on the living room floor. Tara did this. She actually, if you go out out to the Extraordinary Women Connect page, you will see her story where she shares where she was shattered on the living room floor. If you do story spotlights, hashtag story spotlights on Extraordinary Women Connect. So you can see pivoting life after 50. Yes, Christine, I know you made a huge significant thing. Beata says bitten but never broken. So all these story titles, you want to start capturing these and have a list of them that you can really go to, because then you're going to, if you have a bank of stories, as you're on a podcast, you can say, you're going to have different ways that you can think about this. Ashara says new iteration, the way our animals live in you were working on your new iteration of your other piece. So, okay, cool. So here's the components of a signature story. One is you start with a crisis. So in my story that I started to share with you guys, there's this moment where I'm on the phone, I'm in tears, I'm crying, I don't know what the heck to do, right? And I go out to the barn, and the defining moment is when I'm standing there with my horse, and all of a sudden all the pieces start to fall together. The results in success, it's opened up my door. I never looked back to the corporate world ever again. So you're looking for that. Okay, there's this crisis, and then there's this moment that takes you up, and then you have the results and the success that comes from this, right? So this is the way you start to build your signature story. Is you find the different topics. And then you find the way that you go from the crisis to the defining moment to the results and the success. And that's how you build stories. So how do you know? I mean, some of the things that you want to really think about, if there is a story that you go, oh my God, I can't tell that story. I'm guessing that there are some of you, as you were thinking through and you're writing some of your titles down there, like, oh, I'm not telling that story. I can tell you your most vulnerable stories are going to be the ones that connect people to you. And there's going to be people that can relate to exactly where you are. And so it makes you relatable, right? They want to know how you feel. They want to know your opinions, your stories. They want to take out, hold on. Let me back up on that. When you do this, it makes you more relatable. When you're vulnerable, when you're sharing your emotion, it makes you more relatable. And you don't want to tell this linear story. And we just did a Soul Speaks from the Stage where we really worked on building stories. And you don't want this long linear, okay, we did this and we did this and we did this, right? What you want, I didn't give you the whole backstory of how I left the corporate world and I left all of that off on that part of the story, right? So you start with a moment and you say, okay, this is the place where I really want to start with. It's a powerful beginning. And it's about letting them know who you are. It creates the know, love, and trust factor. It creates a common plight connection, which is really important for relatability. And it paints the picture, right? So when I talk about it snowed 18 inches and I'm walking through the barn, I'm walking through the snow, there's frost on her whiskers, all these sorts of things. It brings people into the story. And then you start to, as you look through this whole list of different titles that you've created, you need to really look for the ones that connect to how you serve your clients, right? There's something that really ties to how you serve clients. That moment with my horse helped me find my passion and purpose. And it really was, this next evolution for me. So it was so important. So I mentioned Extraordinary Women Connect in the Story Spotlights. You can go out to that group, and if you put in hashtag Story Spotlights, you're gonna see all sorts of great stories. People sharing their arc way after they had done a 3-day story retreat this year and last year. You're gonna see a whole combination of those, but you can see some really powerful stories that way that makes people want to know them more. So that is a really intricate part of this. So you are in control of your interviews. And this is something that when you're on a podcast interview, I want you to know that, you are really in control of how that interview goes. And you can take your stories, you can take your core message, and you can say, okay, there's all these different lanes into my content, into how I'm sharing this. And it's also a way that you can say, okay, this is how, I mean, and I'm not going to go into that today because we don't have time, but you can take these same message maps and apply them in your social media. It gives you a social media strategy for your whole year. So this core exercise of really starting to get into mapping your messages is a really an important step for you to be able to say, okay, how do I want to show up in this interview, and where would I like this podcast guest or host to take me? You get to guide them. And that's the beauty of that. So a message map is a tool that I actually developed with Ogilvy PR back in my corporate days when we were taking about 150 people through thought leadership training. So we were taking them through some thought leadership training and really helping them get out and get their words out on television, on national world publications. I mean, they were doing a lot of work around this. And so a message map is a tool that, and when we help them develop this, it's like when they were going into, for example, NBC News interview, they knew where they wanted that interview to go. And it's the same thing with a podcast interview. So this is a really good tool for you to be able to say, okay, where do I want my messages to go? I am a thought leader in my own right. I am a leader in my message. What do I want to be speaking about, and how do I take people there? So this is my message map here that I have used. Says your message map. It's my message map. So the women's wisdom is the medicine our earth needs, right? These are topics that I talk about. And underneath one of these, there's a whole bunch of subtopics. Raising up the voice of you. Certainly, I love to go into how do you teach your client, or how do you really get into the voice of you? How do you speak your client's love language? And I have questions on my podcast one sheet, which is something that I am going to be sharing with you guys today, is how do you create a podcast one sheet? I have questions that will lead people into this whole set of information. I have stories associated with this. I have facts associated with this. Raise Up Your Business gets into the way you are showing up in your vision of your business, your right packaging, your right pricing, your all these different ways that you are building a business. It's the strategy of your business. The Raise Up Your Visibility, this is a component of it, right? How do you get your voice out there? You raise up your visibility, podcasting. So this is an area that I love to speak on. And then the fourth area that I speak on a lot is R factor. So raising up your R factor means how you resonate. So we get into mindset, we get into body, spirit, community, all these different different components of how you show up and how you resonate energetically, right? High vibrational. I love to talk about that. So these are all different ways. And I have questions on my podcast one sheet that people can really go to, they can go, I'm thought this through. What are the things I want them to ask me about? So this is a really great tool for you to be able to do this. Now, if you want to see, this is a really detailed tool of this, and I'm not going to go through this because it's hard to read, but you can see my subtopics are here. I know who I want influencers are. So this is just a whole nother deeper level of this. And I'm not going to go into that today because really what's important here is the framework, right? Is the framework of doing this for yourself. So you start with this core message in the middle. You write your message in the middle, and then you come up with what are the things that you want people to know about your business. And you think through, okay, what are the stories that really support this? What are the stories? I mean, like for example, when I talk about Raise Up the Voice of You, I have a story around how I really lost my voice by following all the shiny stars. That's one of the stories that fits in the mix of that. So this is a really good framework for you to build around. So take a picture of that and know that this is a tool that you can come back to and build out all of the components that you want people to really go on a journey with you on. So if you look at my podcast one sheet, which we're going to go into, there's a couple things that I want to point out here. So, this is my bio. The statement, Cami Gellner believes women's voices matter. She's a connector, a storyteller, a business coach for women. Her entrepreneurial journey was sparked by the breath of a horse over a decade ago, right? So there I'm dropping in a little bit of that story so they know that I have something to tell other than just a bunch of signature talk stuff. I actually want to go into stories with people. And we're going to talk about how I personally believe that storytelling is intricately important to podcasting. If somebody wants to come onto my podcast and not tell their personal stories, I'm not interested. I don't want that in my podcast. My podcast is based on storytelling. So there's, you want to showcase what that story is. And then, your basic information off of your bio. If you come down to these interview topics, you're going to see 6 or 7 different interview topics. They tie right back to that message map that I shared with you. And then I give them really specific questions that's going to guide them to the things that I want to talk about. When I send this to a podcast host, they go, oh my gosh, I love to talk about, the 5 rules of marketing you need to break. Or, somebody says, oh my gosh. And the sample questions are awesome when you are a podcast host because it gives you some fodder to work with. It makes preparing so much easier. And when I get a podcast one sheet, and I'll talk about this earlier, I'm just so happy because it makes a huge difference in how much time I have to prep on it. So, this framework here really feeds right into this podcast one sheet. So what you want to remember on a podcast one sheet, I'm going to go deeper into this in a little bit. So I'm going to stop on that. So here's your message map, right? So you're going to have your topics. This is the one you want to take a picture of. You're going to have your topics. You're going to think through what stories, what facts, what subtopics you might come up into that, and what questions can lead people into that. If you look back at my questions, how has your focus on growing connected companies helped grow your business? That was something that I wanted to, it makes for, and there's stories behind each one of these, right? There's stories, there's something that I can talk about really interesting. How can we raise up our energetic vibration, and how does this help us grow our business? These are just, you're looking for questions that really lead people to your topics. So this is something, we're not going to have time to really go into deeper today, but it's a framework for you really to start thinking through. If you're going to be on podcast, what is it that you want people to know, that you want, that really, and they all come back to this core message at the middle that you guys want them to stand for. So there you go. Okay, let's talk about getting on shows. One thing, before we even dig into this, I want to just emphasize that podcasting, investing in podcasting for yourself, time, money, whatever that looks like for you, you should have some very basic foundations in your business in place. First of all, the voice of your business means you know who your target audience is. You know how you serve your target audience. You speak their love language so that you have clients coming to you saying, my gosh, I want some of that. So you're already you've got that clarity around what your business stands for and how you serve people. And people are saying, yes, I want that. So that voice piece of your business is really important, meaning the voice of how you bring people and market people into your business. Because if you aren't clear on who you serve, it's hard to pick the right podcast. If you aren't clear on what your needs and desires of your ideal clients are, it's hard to have these conversations in a way that draws more people into your business. So a really important part of this. The vision part of it is your packaging and your pricing. You know where you want to put your clients. If you don't have your packaging and your pricing and how you're bringing people into your business and have the model done, the revenue models of how you want to grow your business from a dollar perspective, it's a little bit early. It's premature to start getting out on the podcast because when you bring people into your business, you want to have a place to put them. So these are two really important pieces before you really get into the visibility part of it. So this is, think this through from that perspective of how, do I have these foundations in place before you start to do that? And if you want, if you're building this and you want to really check in, just let me know if you want to see if you want to checkpoint and say, gosh, am I ready for this? Just reach out to me, and I'm happy to have this conversation to see if you put those pieces in place yet, or if you're feeling good with that or not. Okay. So if you're going to start pitching, you're going to want to have a podcaster one sheet. And we've talked about, this is a couple of different ones. Again, you're going to see some of these same, there's the bio, there's the interview topics, there's the sample questions and ways that people can connect with you. So these are important part of what you want to really create. If you're going to be taking, if you're going to be going out and pitching yourself, this is what, you're going to want to have one of these, and so that you become a great guest. Again, there's mine. We've talked about that. The pitch outreach. So the pitch outreach is where you've got your podcast one sheet, and this is components of an email that you might send to somebody. So components of this email, you're going to have a subject line. You would say guest idea. So you might have a topic that you want to talk about. So you'd have your name and then the topic that you want to talk about. So name and topic in the subject line. And then in the paragraph one, there is a personal opening and authentic to your voice. You want to make them smile. You want to connect with them. And then you introduce yourself and say, I'm reaching out for a guest for your show. Or it can be, I'm looking, right? That is, I'm looking to be a guest on your show. And this is really important, where you start to name their show. There's nothing worse than getting an email, and I can tell you, I get them every day. I want to be a guest on your show. I'd like to pitch this guest for your show. His name is Bob. He'd be a great guest for your show. They haven't even listened to my podcast, right? They don't even know that my podcast is called Extraordinary Women Radio. So you want to make sure you're naming their show. And then you're saying, I know your listeners are looking to learn about, and you know what their show's about. And this is why I'm a perfect person for this, right? So you're connecting that, you're connecting you into what the purpose and the mission of that show is, into what you teach. So this is a really an intricate part of this is finding a way to, in that first paragraph, you're saying, this is what your podcast is about, and this is why I fit. And then paragraph 2, you start to tell your story and be direct, build your credibility. This is your place to start to, bring the best of you to that. And then paragraph 3 is simply, I'm attaching my one sheet here. So it's something that they can look at. They can go deeper into the content for that. And this is a good way to go out to somebody. Now, if you know the podcast guest, or the podcast host, I can tell you, I believe that's one of the best ways that you can really, to make that connection, is be in community where there's people looking for podcast guests and people looking for podcast hosts. This is a good way to play in that. But then you have the toolkit to say, okay, this is why I'd be a great guest for your show. Somebody reaches out to me and says, oh, I'd be a great guest for your show. I just launched my book. That's all about their book, and it's not making that connection. Right? So that's something that you really want to make sure is that you're leading with what you've done your research on that show. So also coming soon is I'll be announcing a partnership with Podmatch in the next couple of weeks. Podmatch is an online matching service. It's got AI and artificial intelligence built into it, where you can put your podcast one sheet. They use a very similar approach to what I just shared with you. And they have podcast hosts who have put their information on. And then you can start getting You can start getting this. If you guys are interested in knowing about this before we're fully launched, I can actually send you an affiliate link to this. So afterwards, just drop me a message. And we've talked about the importance of adding podcasting to your marketing strategy. It's the best way to do this. We have talked about new tools on your messaging strategy so that you can really shine your best light. You can show up as a unique guest and bring a ton of value to your podcast host audiences. And you can attract people into your business because your messaging is so specifically speaking to their, your client's love language. You've got that. We've talked about getting on podcast. And next, we're going to be talking about how to be an extraordinary podcast guest. So once you land the interview, how are you showing up in a great way, right? How are you showing up in a way that that they like? So they go, oh my gosh, that was such a good interview. It feels so good. I can tell you too. When you finish an interview and people go, oh my God, that was so amazing. You were such a good interview. My audience is going to love you. All those sorts of things makes you feel good. And the more you do it, the better, the more people are saying, oh my gosh, I heard your interview. I need to get you onto my show as well. Let's dig in now to being a great guest. And this is fun. I actually did some good research around this. Here, I've had 200 episodes recorded. When I think about a great guest for me, I'm pretty particular. I'm looking for change makers, for impact makers. They are aligned to my mission. I am looking for people who have a good personal story. It's critical for me. If somebody wants to do their signature talk out of their book, I'm like, no, not interested. So to me, there's got to be some story that they've come through, right? This big story that they've come through. And frankly, at this point, I am looking for people that have large following and community. So that's something that I check as I am looking, as my team is looking at who's going to be the right guest for me. They are big change makers. They've done big things in the world and they've got a following because that's what's making my podcast grow. So, yes. So I did this. This was really fun. I did this weekend. A great guest to me, and I went out to a lot of my podcasting friends, and I said, "Okay, what is Ashara? You and I can chat about. Yes, you can do that. Yes." So I went out to a bunch of my podcast friends, and I asked them this question: what does a great guest do, and what does an annoying guest do? And so I want to go through these. I love to source things off of social media. And, some of these I had, and some of them they got added into or changed. And so there's some good ones in here. So a great guest prepares and does the pre-work, including sending bios and photos. So they will always say, I want to know more. And how do I really do the, how do I go there with you, right? So make sure you do their homework for them. You have a podcast one sheet. You understand the purpose of the show and you speak to their audience. A great guest is engaged, tells stories, and is present. A great guest understands changing pace, tonality, conversational goals. This is a conversation. People, when you're on a podcast, this is not, and you'll see there's another one here that talks about this, but you want to be in a conversation and your voice is not, just level all the way through it. You treat the interview like a friendly tennis match. I'll volley to you. You can share your expert insight, and then you volley back over to me and I can respond and go deeper. And then it gets deeper. You get into a deeper conversation. And that's what makes every interview different, is when you really master that ability to be able to volley back and forth like that, because every podcast guest is going to take different components of this and, through a deeper way. Have headphones, these are mine. I use these headphones. We'll talk a little bit about equipment here in just a moment. But you've got to have a headphone and a real microphone. I don't know if I can share this with you, but my microphone here is, I have these different components, and I'll share what those are here in just a moment. But it's really important to podcast hosts that we create good audio. Be in a quiet place. If you have stuff going on, you really need to make it your space quiet. You know what makes noise in your space, and remove that. And then you share the episodes with your peeps, right? I mean, that is so important, so important. There's nothing more annoying than you spend the time, you promote the guest, and then they don't take that out to their peeps. So you really want to make sure that, if you are going to be a great guest, you want to be creating a social approach to this afterwards. Nancy, I'll send you out the, okay, never mind. That was a direct message. And don't record podcasts on trash truck days. That's a good one, Casey, right? Here's an annoying guest. One that's late, right? They're like, oh my God, 5 minutes. They were supposed to start 5 minutes ago, and they kind of see on, they just show up late. They talk at you and the audience. And this is a big one for me. This is when a podcaster just gets on and they're just talking about, at you. It's such a turnoff. You want the conversation, right? They respond to you with their question with, it's in the book. This is a conversation. If somebody asks you something, you're going to have the opportunity to talk about your book, but don't keep answering with, it's in the book. I can think of a couple of podcasts where they just kept saying, oh, if you read the book, you'll hear about that. I'd ask a question. Oh, if you read the book. And that's not a conversation. Think about if you're in real life, right? Ignores your question to instead pitch their products or services. This is not a pitch fest. It's very different than, a lot of other marketing ways. This is conversations about value. Turn off your phones, your notifications, and your beeps, your text. If your computer has notification beeps popping up, it's really, really distracting. This is one that somebody actually sent me. An annoying guest is someone who's driving a car with a dog through a construction site. Right? Yeah, there you go. An annoying guest keeps talking without a moment to pause. This is one that somebody sent me also. Lord, it's not a TED Talk. I love it. And annoying guest doesn't ask if they can just share an offer and just goes into full pitch mode at some point during the interview. You have to understand what's the culture of that podcast. Is it a fit? Is some podcasts let you create an offer at the end? Some do not. Ask. Just simply ask. Charisse has another one. Something else I learned as well. If your podcast host is international, make sure your calendar entry is in their time zone, not yours. Yep, I have gotten stuck with that one too. Totally, Charisse. I've been guilty of that one myself. So that's a really good one. Generally, when you're booking a podcast interview on somebody's show, they'll send you their calendar, and it's simply a matter of looking at the top of the box and saying, what time zone is this in, and then booking it and just checking that. And that daylight savings time, knowing that it's different. I mean, even with like Arizona, I know that Arizona doesn't change daylight savings time. So you have to really learn to pay attention to these things. So this is just a good way. Remember, if you're just remembering that, show up, do the pre-work, do all the things, help your host prepare so they don't have to track you down. Really come and engage in conversation, and take out all the extra noise around you. Chances are it's going to be an amazing podcast. So you landed the interview. First of all, thank your host, right? And then ask them, who's your audience? How can I make this a great show? Usually before you will start a podcast, you're going to get a moment with your host, and, you get on at your time, and you can, that can be a great way as you get on with the host. You've already gone out, you've done your prep work, which you're going to talk about here in just a moment. But if you get onto that podcast and say, okay, tell me who's your audience and how can I make this the best show for them? And they'll tell you, if you just give them that space for that. We've talked about the prep work, asking about the invitation at the end. Don't assume. is the show audio or video only, or is it video also? I mean, that's going to show how you're going to show up on camera, right? I mean, you really want to make sure, and you can just ask that question up front beforehand. And then always, always, always listen to their podcast. Go listen to at least one episode. And, beforehand, you can go out and you can do a social post saying, oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to be interviewing with so-and-so, and tag the host so that they know that you're going to be going out and you're going to be putting information out to really help them. Right. I mean, they start to know that you're going to be sharing their content. And they're going to, if they know that you're going to be sharing their content, you're both going to be sharing the content in a bigger way. And that's, expansive. That's so expansive. Your message map is a great tool to have available, but you don't want a script, right? You want to know, once doing the message map, it gives you ways to think through what are the things I want to talk about. You've given them the podcast one sheet, but you don't want to script anything. There's nothing that you want scripted whatsoever. You really want to make this space for people to be able to make their decisions. Or you want not to make decisions, but you want that host to be able to go in different directions. And you've done the pre-work, so you know where to bring up those stories. Those stories that live within you. You don't have to have those written down, right? You're giving the host the prompts so that those stories will come out. And a couple of the other things too, before you get on that show is doing more research. Is what's the format of the interview? Is it storytelling versus training? You're going to find both. I've already mentioned that my podcast is a storytelling platform, but there's certainly podcasts that are very specifically focused on an area of expertise. So you just need to know what they're looking for, right? I've been on marketing podcasts, and then I'll know that we're going to be talking about marketing components, right? What are the 5 rules of marketing we need to break? So just really know what kind of format that is. And then you know that because you've gone out and listened to it. You scroll through their guest list. Who have they interviewed? Why have they interviewed them? What's the mission of their show? You can go find that out. How does your message fit in? You've already done that because you've pitched yourself to them. And how engaged is their audience? You can follow their social to look at that. So this is, a good way for you to just, these are just other things that you might want to look at as you're getting ready to be on a podcast with somebody. Promise My Audio. This is the one that I use. It's an Audio Technica AT 2020. Now, I bought this 4 years ago, but I think anything Audio Technica is a good tool. There's a lot of different ones, but I've found this has been a really good one for me. A nice arm that gets you to move your microphone in different directions. And then you've got these pop filters here that really help just keep your sound clear. So those are really good tools to have as part of your toolkit. I also have these that are they're an Audio Technica headset versus the big heavy ones. I like these. You do need to have earphones, because otherwise you are going to get feedback off of your computer. You never want to do an interview directly off your computer microphone, because you'll get some feedback. And so it won't be a strong audio. And I can promise you that it's one of the most important things that a podcast host wants, is to create a podcast with really good audio. But a simple iPhone microphone works, their iPhone microphone works really well as well. You can use as long as your battery is all charged up, you can use your earpods, or you can use, the plug-in ones. I actually prefer the plug-in ones if you're going to do in fact, I'm going to even say that I don't recommend this. I recommend the plug-in ones versus these, because you want the best connection that you're going to get. So I would go for the plug-in earphones if you don't have the others. But if you are going to be making podcasting an important part of your mix, this is not that expensive, guys. This is, couple $100 here, and you have all the right tools that really gets you, doing this in a much more professional way. My earphones plug into this. So, this plugs into my computer here. My earphones plug into this so that it's coming through my microphone. Okay, game day. You got the interview, be you, show up on time, know your story, turn off all your phones, make sure you have a quiet area. Pets is a consideration. Here's mine. I'll tell you mine. My little Yorkie, he's under my desk right now. He sleeps under my desk because then I know he's not running around the house barking at something that he sees. My Labrador sleeps in the next room because he would sit in here and he'd lick and he'd make noise and you'd hear all of that. So just know what pets, you really have to know what each pet might do. And you need to make sure that they're not interrupting the sound. My Yorkie would never bark in here because there's nothing for him to see to bark. So, occasionally he might start to snore. He's close enough to my foot that I can actually tap on him and make him quit snoring. So these are the sorts of things that you want to do. If it's video, be camera ready, show up on time, smile, just really have fun. It is so much fun just to get on and have great conversations with amazing people. And you're building community, you're building new collaborations. I can't tell you how much wonderful collaboration has come from, having somebody on my show or going on somebody's show. And we're like, oh my gosh, we speak each other's love language. I love what you're doing, and we love what each other is doing. And how do we do more of this, right? How do we create more collaboration together? Because your stuff is really good stuff for my community and vice versa. And, people who have been on my podcast have become sponsors of some of my events. They have, it becomes, and I've become clients of theirs. And I've had people become clients of mine. And so there's this wonderful love fest that really starts to take place when you're building connection and relationship with somebody in that sort of a way. So just treat this like as a beautiful relationship, a new way to open up. And frankly, it's like, what fun to build one-on-one with somebody and then one to many because it goes out to many, but you're building a really deep relationship with somebody one-on-one. And that's the beauty of podcasting, is that you create these new, beautiful relationships. So extending the know, love, and trust factor beyond the interview is, how do you invite people deeper into your community, right? So you've come out, you've shared this interview, and, some of them, again, we've talked about this. What kind of invitation can you extend at the end of this? There's all different things that you can do. You can invite them into a quiz. You can have them, go watch a free video. You can give them a Facebook group, which is what I do. You can have time with you, which I think is a really good one. If you want to give somebody 30 minutes with you and say, if anybody wants to go deeper with this work, I would be happy to do 30 minutes with anybody in your audience that wants to go deeper in this content. That's a really nice one, because again, it's building that know, love, and trust factor with somebody. But it's an invitation to something you're putting on. Often in the fall, I'll be inviting people into my Extraordinary Women Ignite conference. And, so it's like, just think about what's the kind of invitation that you want to put out into the world, out to the listeners of that podcast, so that you can take that to a new level. You invite them into your community. So extremely powerful to think through what kind of invitation you want to extend. Ask the guest, can I do this? Is it okay if I invite people into my Facebook group or into some free time with me or to this event that I'm hosting? This is really important to ask them, but it's a great way. This is how you really start to make this prosperous for you and building your community. So my know, love, and trust factor approach. This is what I do at the end of my Extraordinary Women radio interviews. I invite them into this community. After I am on other people's shows, I invite them into my Extraordinary Women Connect, Why do I do this? Extraordinary Women Connect is all about connecting great women to great women. And I am there for the service of raising up women's voices, their visibility, and their business. So this is an invitation that I extend after every interview, or any interview, as long as I can. I don't think I've ever had anybody tell me I can't invite them to my Facebook group. It's a really non-salesy approach. Come to my group. This is a great place to connect with me. And so this is where I send people, because then I can invite people into my community. And it's a really good way that I can continue to pour more love on them, right? I pour more love they get more of my, all the stuff that I bring to that community, from teachings, from connection, to all the different ways that people can be in community. That's what I bring there. And that's where, when I start moving into my events in the fall time, that's where I'm creating excitement for that, right? Then I get people that come from those podcast shows to go to my events. And that's the beauty of how that all fits together for me. And when I think about community builds business, right? This is the number one reason that when I invite people in, it's growing this know, love, and trust factor, more value to extend to them, more community to connect. This is the place that I do this in. So that's why that's my choice of all those different options that are there. It's like, I want to pour more love onto people after they've heard me on a podcast, so that, they get to know me more. They get to know my community more. So that's the approach that I take. Okay, so after the interview, we're almost there, guys. Hang in there. You want to thank the podcast host. Reach out to them, thank them. And I actually send a thank you card. I use a place called Expressionaries. Charisse, if you're still there, maybe you can even post their webs, the Expressory. Thank you. Can you post their website? Just because this is such a great place that we have a process where my podcast hosts all get thanked after the interview. We have a process. They get a handmade card made by the Expressory, and that's a really good place that that just shows appreciation and continues to build that relationship with that person. They get a nice handwritten card that is handmade, and it just shows your appreciation for them. The other part of that about this is share. And we actually have written processes. My team has a written process that after the interview is done, what takes place when that interview comes out. My team has all these steps that they go through, and I'll share with you what they do. So they make memes from those interviews. They go through and they actually listen to the interview. They take notes. So there's a note sheet that comes out of it, and they pull some of the quotes out of it. So these are just different quotes from different podcast interviews that I've been on that my team creates for me. And then they create the social posts that go along with that. Kathy, do I include my business card in the thank you note? No, I don't. I just keep it really personal. It's like, thank you for, all that you did for me. So this is, this is the first step that we do. So they create these memes, and then they go onto our social media scheduler, and they schedule all these different posts out, and they'll include a link to the full episode. So they'll, so we'll be sending more people to Wisdom Talk Radio, and we'll be sending more people to the show with Pat Miller. I mean, these are all different ways that show is going to get more exposure because of this, right? And we also create these little mini clips. Sorry, this is so fuzzy, but we use a tool that creates, that can go out and pull a little clip from that video, a little audio clip. And we'll use those audio clips for posting, just a little live one. So, it might just be, 30 seconds or a minute of audio from that interview that will get posted as well. So it's another great way to really extend that. And then we have a dedicated page on our on the website. In fact, I'm going to pop over there and show that to you. So this is here. You got the podcast host and guest. So this is me. I need to update this because I'm almost at 200 as of a couple weeks. I put my media spotlights on here as well. So, different places that I'm getting media because I want them to be able to, Charisse, I was going to pull that up. What was it? That I will follow up with you guys on what that tool is because JC does all of that, and so I don't know which tool it is. It starts with an A. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But then we get into the podcast guest appearances, right? So people can come here then, and they can learn all this stuff about me. It falls under my about page. It is Audacity. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what it is. Thank you, Charisse. So you can scroll through here and you can see all these different interviews that I've been on, and somebody can pop on there and listen. And frankly, it's a great way. It's a great thing for somebody that's a new client or a prospective client to come in here and go, oh my gosh, look at the show she's been on. There's a link there to invite people to, if they want to invite me to their podcast. And again, here's my interview topics and my sample questions, my bio. So that's right off of my podcast one sheet. And then there's a whole bunch of media resources here with downloads. So people can get my bio, they can get my topics, they can get my questions, they can get my photos, which is really important. This is a great link that somebody can come and pick a whole bunch of different photos from. And this is a really good tool to have as you're prepping, and people are saying, I need your photos. It's like all my photos, all my bio and everything is right here. It simplifies things on your end just from a time management perspective. When you link to the podcast you've been on, does it go to the host page or the Apple's podcast page? I tend to like to go to Apple. And that's a great question, Casey. Now, some of these are going to be like a few of these, like, for example, Beata's is on here. Meaningful Conversations with Beata. That is a podcast, or that's a Facebook Live. But I put them on here, right? Because this is part of me telling my story. And there's another one on here that is with the dames. It's one that was a Facebook Live. So anyway, I put both of those on there. And I do like the Apple podcast page. So thanks for that, Charisse. You're rocking it today. Thanks, honey. So anyway, this is a really good, I like being able to have this kind of a tool. It's an easy place for people to, go to and find out more about where I'm showing up. And, it gives them the tools to go, even if somebody wants to look for, if they want to listen to something about from my, that I've done before, they've got all of these options to choose from. So they will know what kind of guest I am.